The 2006 Lexmark Indy 300 telecast, proudly brought to you by Qantas. Mitsubishi Fuso Trucks and Buses. We put drivers first. And Lexmark, printers that go to work for you.
They come in search of the light. The gleam of Gold Coast glamour. The glow that only a championship victory can bring. Sebastian Bourdais is almost there, in spite of some spirited challenges. Some heated rivalries.
Oh, no!
And when they're not fighting for his title, they're just fighting.
That was absolutely ridiculous.
Or crashing.
And she hits the wall with phenomenal force.
Here, where the sun frames a frantic stage, where the V8 supercars chime in for a mid-season mood swing, motorsport lights up like nowhere else on Earth. Well, yesterday, all we saw was green and gold. Today, it's all about blue and grey. The weather holds the key to Will Power's dream of pole position here, while some drivers are thinking only about getting a qualifying time. A top of 27 degrees expected on the Gold Coast. That's okay, but we've had a little rain already, and afternoon showers and storms are predicted. Hello, I'm Bill Woods. Welcome to the Lexmark Indy 300 weekend. We've had two exciting days already, but these are the decisive days. Talk about a feast. If you're a motorsport fan, this is a hamburger with the lot. Don't miss a minute. The drivers won't. It's time to set up the show. The ChampCars have one last shot at practice before they line up for final qualifying this afternoon. And the supercar shootout sorts the top 10 before the entire fleet is unleashed for the first of 3 championship races. We'll have all the news from 2 packed pit lanes, plus the preludes, parades and parties that make this the most exhilarating racing week of the year. Well, on top of all that, Friday was, of course, a headline maker for Australian motorsport. If you didn't know about it, where have you been? Kylie King will tell you.
The crowd was hoping to see an Aussie upstage the internationals in the first ChampCar qualifying session. But the signs weren't good early with a crash in practice.
Here's the reason why, and it's Ryan Briscoe in the wall.
Briscoe's car was towed back to the pits, but he would not take part in qualifying. Some of the stars were also in the wars during practice. Justin Wilson went into the pits early with a painful wrist injury after the steering wheel was ripped from his hands after clipping a tyre bundle. Paul Tracy also failed to make it to qualifying. Problems with his fuel system saw him stranded in pit lane. With Briscoe out, compatriot Will Power set a cracking pace, matching it with ChampCar champion Sebastian Bourdais.
Will Power responds instantly with a 32.36, so Will's on the gas.
In the closing stages, it was a 4-way battle with Bourdais, Junqueira and Allmendinger on attack, but Power again took charge.
He's the fastest man on the racetrack at the moment. So the Queenslander rising to the occasion, an outstanding performance.
With just minutes remaining, Allmendinger went all out in one final challenge.
Trouble for Allmendinger. He's off the road at turn 8 at Falcon Turn. Red flag for AJ Allmendinger, and this may well guarantee Will Power a front row row starting spot for Sunday's event.
The checkered flag was brought out, ending the session, Power securing provisional pole and a valuable championship point for Team Australia. In V8 supercar qualifying, Rick Kelly quickly signalled his intentions to rein in Craig Lowndes for the championship, setting a quick time early and then bettering it.
Here's Rick, lights are on, he's going for it again.
His HSV Commodore appeared to be in a league of its own.
Rick Kelly has just done a 1 minute 49.7, the fastest ever lap of this racetrack in a V8 supercar.
James Courtney was using all of the track in an effort to gain pace, while Jason Bright continued his good qualifying form.
The top 10, Jason Bright, a 1:49.69. How about that from the catboard man?
Todd Kelly was also quick. Then Garth Tander got amongst the action.
Tander goes 1:49.24, but his teammate steals it away with a 1:49.1.
While the Toll HSV dealer team dominated qualifying, they'll be hoping for an equally impressive performance in the top 10 shootout.
Now for all the nuts and bolts of today's action, a couple of nuts who've bolted down to the Network 10 Tech Centre, Lee Diffie and Neil Crompton.
Good morning, Billy, and good morning, everyone. And each and every year when we come here to Surfers Paradise, we look forward to seeing the guys who have been in this series for many years, and we generally introduce a lot of newcomers and some rookies to the series, but our focus is made easy this year. For the first time ever, we've got two Aussies in the field. That's great.
Two great guys. Good morning, Lee. Good morning, everybody. Yeah, these guys are red hot. They've earned their spot in ChampCar. It's 1 year since Will Power made his ChampCar debut with Team Australia here last year, and he's grown so much now. He understands the cars, he understands the series, he understands the team he's working with, and a huge opportunity this weekend for Ryan Briscoe, who should be in Formula One or in ChampCar racing, based on his great performances in junior categories over the years. He's earned a spot with the Roosport team this weekend, and I'm sure he'll make it an effective one for him. But tremendous yesterday to watch Will Power doing such an outstanding job. Very, very fast lap times. So fast, in fact, that they almost got down to the lap record time set by Cristiano De Mata in 2002, which was a 1 minute 30.9. They did 31.4s yesterday. Depends a bit on the weather that Bill spoke about a moment ago as to whether they'll eclipse that. This is the first time, Lee, that we've ever seen what's described as the red band tyres in ChampCar, which are the softer option tyre. And we'll talk more about that throughout the duration of the telecast today to explain it. But it was a great day of action here.
That's really spiced things up. And as you said, we will elaborate on that tyre situation. Just to put a finer point on Briscoe, the team are very happy with the way, although he crashed the car yesterday and he said it was a little silly error, the team are very pleased with him and the progress he's made already. Well, let's talk about the incidents, because it was somewhat of an action-packed day, wasn't it?
It was a bit bizarre. First of all, in the morning practice session, we had Paul Tracy making a mistake, a rare mistake up in the VB chicane up at turn 7. Very easy to get out of shape up there if you get out of rhythm. He just clipped the tyre bundle on the way through and it wrenched the wheel out of his hands, and then he fired off to the left-hand wall. That damaged, obviously, the front left suspension and the tub of that car, so he lost his primary car. They then went to the spare car for qualifying but found that it wouldn't start. They had a fuel pickup problem with that vehicle. But you underscored a very important point. There were a lot of incidents yesterday. The track was very fast for whatever reason. There are a number of different patches around here that have changed in 365 days, and I think they're in critical areas, in braking areas and one or two spots where the cars are under load round corners, and it's made the track just that little bit quicker. Everyone was pushing. There's also been a difference in the way they've treated the tyre bundles, and we'll talk more about that in a moment. But yeah, a whole bunch of things happened. Ryan Briscoe in trouble in the early part of qualifying, only got to turn 2, unfortunate, but we're going to see much better things from him today. Problem for Justin Wilson, who was outlined in that package a moment ago. A rare thing. I mean, we've seen guys go out of race cars because of monumental shunts, and we've seen a couple of those throughout this championship year. But to catch a tyre bundle and tweak your wrist and break your scaphoid, that's a bit of a rarity. But these cars don't have power steering, unlike a Formula One car or a V8 supercar, so they're very heavy to steer. But this tyre bundle thing has created a little bit of an issue.
Yeah, we're going to talk lots more about that. This is your first time with us to the Lexmark Indy 300. This is what it's all about.
At this point in the weekend, it's worth stopping to consider some of the numbers surrounding the Lexmark Indy 300. This is a 59-lap race, which equates to around about 265 kilometres, plus a couple of extra Ks for the warm-up laps. Now, these Champ cars have a fuel tank capacity of 130 litres, and depending on who you are and how hard you're running around this course, you'll burn fuel at the rate of about 6.5 litres per lap, and that's about 5 kilos per lap, so you dump a lot of weight with every lap of this circuit. Now, Champ car ChampCar mandates the total amount of fuel that you can use. See this fuel tank up here? 354 litres is the maximum amount of fuel that you'll be given for this motor race, and they use that on the fuel formula basis of 1.85 miles per gallon using the old American burn method. We know from the 130 litres and the burn rate, that gives you a fuel window of about 19 to 20 laps per fuel segment. So it's going to be a 2-stop, 3-segment motor race. And given that scenario, you're going to have to be very careful right near the end of the 3rd segment because you could be very low on fuel. But typically you get safety cars at this racetrack because it is a dangerous racetrack. Last year, for example, we had 2 of them. Now, when the car comes into the pit lane and the boys service the vehicle, on comes the fuel at a rate of about 13 litres per second. It takes about 10 seconds to fill the tank up. They'll rattle on another set of those control Bridgestone wheels and tyres, and they'll be rattling 2 sets of those on through the course of the race, although sometimes, depending on tyre wear, they might leave a set on. Another quirky thing about ChampCar when they make their stops in here, because the fuel they use is methanol, which is wood alcohol and water soluble, to reduce the fire risk, as the car leaves the lane, the boys in the crew will squirt some high pressure water at the car, and that dissolves the fuel, reduces the vapour and reduces the fire risk. It's quirky, but it's very effective.
Will Power started off in a fantastic way yesterday, Will, even though it was only Friday, but it still guarantees you a front row start for the weekend.
Yeah, I mean, that's the best sort of result we could ask for the start on the front row here is really important. You know, try to keep out of all the mayhem in the first corner. Yeah, it's just great. I'm just so happy for Craig Gore and Derek Walker and all the Team Australia guys. They put a lot of effort in for this race, and now it's paid off.
Look at the red banded tyres yesterday. What sort of game were in those tyres when you eventually ran them?
Well, for us, it seemed like at least half a second. And I was up on the next lap as well before the red flag. So it's hard to say because on the blacks, I didn't really get a good clean lap. But I think the reds around here, because of the nature of the circuit, and it's quite slippery, you do get a bigger gain.
More rubber down for today, obviously. Temperatures down. Is that better aero for the car and obviously performance with the turbo and engine?
Yeah, our cars really work well in the cool, so the track's definitely going to be quicker today. You know, the more grip, more cool weather, more downforce and all that. So if it doesn't rain in qualifying, I'd say everyone will go faster.
It's great to see you on the front row, and you have a good day today.
Thank you very much.
6th fastest time in qualifying yesterday was the series champion in V8 supercar, Russell Ingall. But boy, the times from the HSV dealer team at the top of the order were very impressive, Russell.
Super quick. I can't believe they're over a second faster than the qualifying times from last year. I mean, that's a big amount. That's more than we've seen at any other circuit this year. So their cars definitely suit the place. Mind you, there's a Ford there in Winterbottom. He's 3rd and only a 10th off of him, so that means we've got to pick up the pace. Obviously the blue ovals can do the pace, so we've got to find about another half a second, which I don't know, in the shootout's going to be hard work. But look, there's a bit of a question mark about brakes as well. A lot of teams are complaining about brake life and consistency around here. We've done a lot of homework on that front, so if we just stay, hopefully I want to stay 6 or better, and then we would know we've got a very good brake package. I'll tell you what, a few of the guys up front, I don't think they can say the same thing.
The other big question mark today, Russell, is weather. If it does change today, if the Surfers Paradise circuit becomes wet, what's it like in a supercar?
Probably the worst place in the world. I'll tell you what, to take an old saying from Dick Johnson, it's like a dog on lino. It's absolutely no grip at all. The trouble is that the road is crowned, but the weather, actually, the rain doesn't drain away on it because the walls actually hold, the concrete blocks actually hold the water in. So you get puddles, very slippery. There's probably about 4 or 5 different types of bitumen on here as well. Just the worst place, but, you know, good for the spectators.
It's going to be a great round of the championship here on the streets of Surfers Paradise, and the series champion is ready for a big day out.
Well, we're all ready for a big day out. Weather's on our side. We hope the rain stays away. At least it's a little bit cooler today. But let's talk V8s for a moment, Neil, because it was a pretty interesting day yesterday. The guys were right on the limit. Some made it into the 10, some didn't. I think we're set up for a great weekend.
The thing that really blew me away was the speed.
Yes.
Just 365 days later, they've found a pile of time. Last year, the fastest man in qualifying was Greg Murphy. He did a 1 minute 51.3 or something. Yesterday, you're talking about low 49s. It's in a completely different speed league. And that begs a question. This place we know is really tough on brakes, probably the second toughest after Symmons Plains. And there were a lot of drivers on the radio talking about the fact that their brake performance had peaked and was starting to go downhill. And if they're going to run at that sort of intensity in the 3 sprint races over the weekend, they'll have to watch that. So that's going to be fascinating. But it was a great qualifying session, very intense. The times kept on tumbling, and I bumped into Jason Bargwanna before on his way back to the pit lane behind us. And he said, have a look at those numbers. He said, you cannot believe how much I had to hang it out to get into the mid-50s, and I thought I was Hollywood, and then the boys went and blew me away with a low 49, but it was a great performance by Rick and Garth.
And the looks on the faces, in particular Mark Winterbottom, of course race car drivers love to go fast, but his eyes were lit up and he said, that's the fastest I've ever been around here by about 2 seconds. So the guys are enjoying the extra speed. Yeah,
it was really great to watch. Great motor racing, real intense stuff. It's a real buzz to drive around a street circuit because there is no room for a mistake anywhere. You're right up to the margin. Millimetres separate the car from the concrete walls, and it's a guessing game in some instances because you come around various blind corners and you've got to estimate how far you want to throw that 1.5 tons at a couple of 100 kilometres an hour, and we saw some of the best guys doing it beautifully yesterday.
There's some interesting stories to tell. James Courtney made the top 10 shootout, first time here. Mark Scaife, it's the first time this year he's missed the shootout. We've got lots to talk about, Billy, throughout the course of the day.
And a very important practice session coming up for the Champ Cars, Lee and Neil. Of course, Neil will join me in the commentary box for that. We have Paul Tracy, Catherine Legge and Ryan Briscoe of Australia still chasing qualifying times for Sunday's race. And Paul Tracy is mean and lean, at least in terms of his hairstyle this weekend. He'll need to be. We'll be back with more after this.
This is Catherine Legge, and you're watching the Lexmark Indy 300 on
Mitsubishi Fuso Trucks and Fujitsu are giving you the chance to win a Fujitsu 42-inch plasma screen valued at $10,000 plus $5,000 cash during the Lexmark Indy 300. Simply text the words Fuso Trucks to 1991 1088 for your chance to win. Entries close midnight Sunday. Good luck from Mitsubishi Fuso and Fujitsu. Yeah, that is some prize there. Thanks to Mitsubishi Fuso and Fujitsu. And of course, you don't have to be at the Lexmark Indy 300 to enter, although many people are, including us, of course, as we welcome Neil Crompton to the studio to assess a very important practice session this morning, more important than most. We'll bring you the climactic final quarter in a moment, but first let's have a look at what's taken place so far, Neil, as a lot of people try to sort themselves out from behind the 8 ball.
Well, because so many people got in strife yesterday for various reasons, they've effectively got to cram 2 days' worth of work into one session, and that's what was happening in this practice session. Very different conditions to the conditions yesterday where there was bright sunlight on the track and a pretty strong northeasterly breeze. So apart from having made a lot of technical changes overnight in almost every case of the 18 cars that are out there, they're also dealing with very, very different grip conditions on the racetrack, and it trapped lots of people. Will Power here with a monstrous front right lock-up on the braking approach into turn 1. And when you straight line those chicanes, that's the Lexmark chicane, the first one, race control automatically brings you into the pit lane and says you've got to do some penance, and you spend a little moment in the sin bin before you can go back out. That's Dan Clark there, running wide at turn 8 in the braking area, almost drilling into the back of Charles Swalsman, who was last year's Atlantic champion in North America. And Clark was the pole man from the last round at Road America.
There's Will's tyre there that Neil was just referring to, and of course fresh set of rubber. And
Ryan Briscoe here in the second of the Roo Sport entries. Now, bad news if you've not caught up with all the information from yesterday's activities. Justin Wilson, who's third in the championship at the moment, the lanky Englishman who we know from Formula One, doing a great job with Roo Sport this year, but clobbered some tyres yesterday and fractured the scaphoid bone in his right wrist, and he's out of business. Ryan Briscoe's campaign this weekend got off to a pretty ropey start when he made contact with the tyres at turn 2 in qualifying. So he's one of the drivers that's down a little on kilometres by comparison to others. It's just there in that second chicane complex where he got into strife. This is the car that in the beginning of the year was driven by AJ Allmendinger, the American in the field, who's now with Forsyth Championship Racing. Carl Russo, who owns this team, they're based in Denver, Colorado, had a lot of faith in this young bloke in AJ Allmendinger and brought him up through the Atlantic Series, gave him his ChampCar opportunity, and then to the surprise of a lot of people in the paddock, dumped him only a few rounds in. So the opportunity then arose for Cristiano De Mata to get on board with the team from, I think it was Portland onwards, Portland, Oregon. And then Cristiano, as many of you may be aware, had an unfortunate accident with Roo Sport while testing at Road America up at Elkhart Lake in Wisconsin, and slapped a deer, of all things, on the racetrack during testing. Suffered some dreadful injuries as a result of that. So this car's not run in the last couple of ChampCar events. And now Ryan Briscoe, who has had an amazing year. He's driven in Grand Am sports cars, V8 supercars for the Holden Racing Team, A1 Grand Prix car, where he most recently finished third at Zandvoort in Holland, and now he gets his ChampCar debut, probably 12 months later than we thought, because in December last year he tested at Sebring in Florida, and we thought he might have got a run with PKV, but they ultimately gave the drive to Catherine Legge. We'll talk about her more. This man here that we're on board with at the moment in the McDonald's Lola, the Newman Haas entry, shooting for championship number 3 in this series. This is Sebastien Bourdais, the Frenchman. He's only got to finish 9th or better in Sunday's race, and he wraps it up. There is another round to come in Mexico in a couple of weeks' time. But the thing you notice about these cars built, you don't have to be a race engineer to pick it. When you look at the ride control of the cars, just generally, despite Sebastien making a small mistake there on the braking approach to turn 5, they just ride so much better around this racetrack than almost any other car. Both he and his teammate Bruno Jonquera, who, when he last raced here 2 years ago, was the winner of the race. He didn't race last year because, unfortunately, he broke his back at the Indianapolis 500 in the IRL race. His place was taken by Oriol Servia, last year's pole sitter. But those Newman Haas cars are the weapon to drive around here. But yesterday, Team Australia, Craig Gord, Derek Walker, Rob Edwards, everybody at the Team Australia team were absolutely beside themselves because Will Power did an outstanding job, put the car on provisional pole, guarantees himself the opportunity of starting on the front row of the grid for Sunday's race. The car today, though, in different ambient conditions, and I would suggest with some changes to it and with a full load of fuel, is not nearly the happy race car that it was yesterday. And that just goes to show how you only need to shift the percentages in this game by very tiny amounts, and suddenly you find yourself, you know, with a car that was in phase and then it's all of a sudden out of phase. That's Catherine Legge in the PKV entry. Team owned by Dan Petit, Kevin Kalkoven, expatriate Australian, and Jimmy Vasser, who's one of the most experienced men in the ChampCar paddock. We caught up with him earlier in the weekend, so we'll have a chat to JV at some point. But Catherine had a monumental accident. If you follow our motorsport coverage on RPM, you may have seen it. You may have seen it in our ChampCar coverage on Monday nights, but she had a monster. The rear wing came off the car and climbed the wall at Road America. This is Bruno Jonquera, the man that I spoke about before. This is the sister car to Sebastien Bourdais' car, the Newman Haas entry. Bruno has been very quick at this racetrack traditionally, and so we expect that he'll probably do some pretty good things here this weekend. That's Oriol Servia in the other of the PKV cars. This was typical of the session. I mean, lots of people on the radios. I'm scanning all the conversations between the drivers and the race engineers, and I didn't hear too many happy campers all moaning and groaning about the behaviour of their cars. This is Ryan Briscoe once again. And this is the second last time that we're going to see these Lola Champ cars with Ford Cosworth turbocharged 2.65 litre V8 in the back of them, because next year we have a new car for this series, the Panos DP01, coming from Elan Technologies in Atlanta, Georgia. And it's a beautiful little car, and we'll probably see it over the course of the weekend. Roberto Moreno, who's a vastly experienced Formula 1 and ChampCar driver, has been doing the testing mileage in that car. He's done about 2,500 miles, and he's got the car out here this weekend, and we'll probably see it being demonstrated. Now, these guys are an interesting talking point. This is the Forsyth team, backed by Jerry Forsyth and his company Indec, two drivers, Paul Tracy and AJ Allmendinger. AJ is the only American in the field. Paul Tracy, series champion in 2003. They had a horror of a day yesterday. Paul got stuck into the wall in the VB chicane at turn 7, grabbed the tyres there, made a small mistake, and it fired the car to the left of the road, did front left damage on the vehicle. And so he lost session time there, and then they went to their spare car. This is Paul we're looking at the moment, by the way. You can pick him up with the red 3 on the car. He's also got the Canadian maple leaf on the very nose of the Lola. Went out for qualifying in their backup car, couldn't get the engine started. They had a fuel supply issue with that, so they are way down on mileage. Throughout this particular session, when he got to the end of it, as we now look at Mario Dominguez, Paul was complaining about the car understeering too much. Having said that, when he was complaining, he went to the top of the charts in the car. Now this is Mario Dominguez, Mexican in the field, just picking up a drive with Rocket Sports with Paul Gentilozzi, who himself is a part owner of the series and a competitor in Trans Am racing in the US, done a lot over the years. And he's picked up a deal with Pemex, which is a Mexican petrol company. And this is his third team this year. He started the season with Forsyth Championship Racing, partnered with Paul Tracy. But believe it or not, the two of them actually got together a couple of times in the early races, and a bit of political unrest in that team. And then he went and drove for Dale Coyne, and now he's picked up the ride with Gentilozzi, and he'll finish the season with those guys. It's going to be a huge weekend for him in a couple of weeks. A bit like Will Powers enduring this weekend, where it's your home event. This is the Tagliani car, and Alex is part two of the Team Australia outfit. They have had one of the most horrific seasons that a race team can endure. 8 major incidents this year, massive tub damage. They've wiped cars off left, right and centre. It's been one of the toughest years, and it culminated in a massive boil over in a brawl between Paul Tracy and Alex Tagliani at one point. So suspension adjustments as everybody tries to fiddle to tune to the track. Track conditions change, Billy, as literally each lap is banked, more and more rubber going down, and the track conditions were so good yesterday. The V8 supercars peeled off unbelievable lap times, and these guys went very fast as well. The lap record in ChampCar here is held by Cristiano Di Mata, set in 2002, a 1 minute 30.9. Yesterday, Will Power's time was on 1 minute 31.4. But we introduced to this race in Australia for the very first time yesterday the Bridgestone option tyre, and they're noted by the big red bands on the sidewall of the tyre. So speeds suddenly leapt up. Last year, Oriol Servia did a 1 minute 32.6, so 1.2 seconds quicker than last year's time was Will Power yesterday. It's good watching this onboard stuff here with Bourdais on the run down here to turn 3. Newman Haas also gear their cars a little differently. There's complete freedom in terms of gearbox ratios in ChampCar, unlike V8 Supercar where they're fixed ratios and a fixed final drive in the diff. With these cars you can trim to the very last little rev. And that's Catherine Legge going off there at, I think that was turn 4 before they turn up to the Esplanade area and turn north onto the Back Beach Road. And Catherine's really been unhappy this weekend. She's got a cold, which makes you pretty grumpy right off the bat, and the car's not matched very well to the road, and I think this track is daunting her a little bit at the moment. And remember that she came off the back of a monster accident, Road America, and if it was any normal person, you would long since have thrown your helmet away and run for your life.
The big news from that first session, or the first part of that practice session, of course, is the bouncing back of the Forsyth team and Ryan Briscoe back on track. So far untroubled. There's rain all over the place. Can we squeeze the rest of this session in before the rain actually hits the track? Well, we'll find out when we come back after the break and run green with this very important session on the Gold Coast. So we welcome you back with just over 12 minutes left in this session and some work still to be done. Great recovery from the Forsyth pairing of Allmendinger and Tracy at the top of the timesheets. Allmendinger just at the back of the shot there as we see Dan Clark powering around the circuit. He's had plenty to say this weekend in his battle with Will Power. At the moment, 5th fastest in this practice session, just ahead of Power. And then Alex Tagliani, who's also lifted his game. Alex complaining of some problems yesterday, which didn't seem to be fixed by some adjustments to the car, but now they are going forward again. Greg?
When you consider, Billy, that the Forsyth team was a little behind the 8 ball, considering the crash-marred day they had yesterday for both AJ Allmendinger and Paul Tracy, the boys have really been working very, very hard this morning. Allmendinger also lost around 15 minutes with a gear position sensor problem. It was out by the order of 180 degrees, so the boys had to work on that a fair bit. Locking tyres early, Allmendinger, fronts in particular, he was complaining of locking everywhere around the circuit, and they've made some wholesale changes to that car. The quote from Paul Tracy was, "My car's not real confidence inspiring." A lot of understeer and snapping sideways on the power down, and they've made wholesale front spring and rear spring changes and wing adjustments as well, but the car's coming good at the moment, boys.
Allmendinger, the only driver in the 132s in this session. Tracy next on a 1:33 flat. Allmendinger nearly a second quicker, incidentally. Then Junqueira, who's only a hundredth or two off Tracy's time and Bourdais. So the Forsyth and Newmas Hards teams asserting themselves this morning. Clark, Power, Tagliani, Ryan Briscoe also bouncing back. We're riding with Bourdais as I speak. Then Pitsonia and Nelson Philippe, who is chasing Paul Tracy in the championship and declares he is his target this weekend.
Conditions are quite a bit different today than they were yesterday. It's overcast now, and in this particular session where we're all hyped up and watching qualifying yesterday afternoon, now they're in the final phases, making sure they have race cars that fully function on a full fuel load. It's 130 litres of fuel, and the weight of the methanol fuel they carry is quite a bit higher than the premium unleaded we use in V8 supercars. So when they're full, it's about 105, 110 kilos of fuel on the car. A lot of people are using the opportunity to try and make final adjustments to understand how to get the most out of their car in race trim, and perhaps even get a sense of what it's like on an empty fuel load with a brand new set of tyres. People like Paul Tracy and AJ Allmendinger, they've got more tyres available to them today because they didn't do all the running that they should have done yesterday. So unfortunately, in their particular instance, they're trying to actually cram 2 days worth of work into this one session.
Tagliani, 8th fastest at the moment, peeling into the pits. Just a couple of drivers. We talk about who's bouncing back today. Greg drew attention to Forsyth and the work they've done to get back into the game. Some of the drivers not so. Oriel Servia has had a few problems in this session, which you would have seen in the previous segment. Andrew Ranger is struggling, another of the inexperienced drivers. He's not a rookie, technically, but he's certainly still learning the series, having even had a run here last year. Catherine Legge hates this track at the moment. She came here sick. She hasn't had a lot of running time because of the engine trouble yesterday. And as you would have seen, has already just nudged the wall. Thankfully, not too badly. But it is a struggle, and Andreas Worth also struggling. These are drivers at the other end of the scale.
This guy's been a little quicker this morning than he was yesterday, coming to terms with the car and the track. The car looks happier on the road, although earlier in this session it was bouncing massively in the front of the car. This is Antonio Pitsonia, his third ChampCar outing for 2006. You're an avid follower of Network 10's motorsport. You'll have seen Antonio in Formula One. He was the backup driver at one point there for Williams for a couple of seasons. He's been out of Formula One this past year.
He seems to keep popping up as Mark Webber's teammate Neil a couple of times at Jag and Williams, but anyway.
And he'll likely fill this seat in the final race of the championship in Mexico. He's 5th at the moment, and on this very lap he just did the fastest lap of the session for him, a 1:33.1, which I believe is quicker than he went yesterday on race tyres. When I say race tyres, they're using the black tyres at the moment, not the red bands. They've got another set of those up their sleeve for qualifying later today. This is Will Power, provisional pole, guaranteed front row starting position. The rules in ChampCar state that the fastest man on Friday, regardless of whatever times are done on Saturday, is guaranteed a front row spot. And he also gets a bonus point in his hunt in the championship, and Will currently leads the Rookie of the Year standings.
And said that he is feeling a lot more relaxed today, and that's not to say he's not going to give it everything and get the car in possibly pole position, depending on the weather and all the other factors involved. Now, coming up to this straight through there, I was just about to point out something, but we'll get to that in a minute, because as we go through the Bourdais Card S's there, maybe on the VB chicane, we'll be able to see how they've changed the tyre bundles this weekend there, from yesterday to today.
Well, I think they've shifted them in a couple of places and lowered them here and there.
After Justin Wilson's...
Will Power's going to have to pit for short-cutting turns 5, 6, the Bourdais Card chicane. Race control just called on the radio, then they'll bring him through. Hasn't been a completely comfortable session for Will Power. He's been off the road quite a few times. As I said before, the conditions are a lot different today. There was bright sunlight on the track yesterday afternoon and yesterday morning in their practice session, the corresponding practice session. There was a very healthy northeasterly breeze blowing. It's quite still out there at the moment and quite muggy, although not direct sunlight on the racetrack. There's the pit in for ChampCar right next to where we're broadcasting from at the moment. The control line signifies 50 miles an hour, 80 kilometres an hour.
Allmendinger's 1:32 is still the fastest time ahead of Tracy's 1:33. And there is Ryan Briscoe. Can't see any damage.
Turn 12.
Looks like he's just lost it, but been able to keep it off the wall, we think. Don't know what's on the other side of that car.
Bourdais was on a lap then that very possibly would have put him to the top of the charts. A series of green boxes, and they've red flagged, obviously, as a result of Ryan being parked awkwardly on the outside of turn 12.
Did you make contact at all, Ryan?
And his team just asking him the same question that we were asking. Looks okay. 1:34.1, about the same time that he was doing yesterday before he had a little problem and did put it into the wall. And big pressure on him this weekend with Justin Wilson having to pull out through injury.
Big understeer. Picked up on the throttle and around it when it was just an awkward one. He's managed to grab the brake though and not back it into the wall. But one of the things that's tricky about these cars is the way they step up from no turbo boost to all the boost, and Ryan had already kind of understeered wide into the grey area, which is why when it came up onto the power band, the car just flicked around. I mean, it's a harmless little half spin there at very low speed, but it just stalled the engine. Gregory.
Neil, we'll do some more homework between now and ChampCar qualifying this afternoon, but the radio chat prior to the commencement of the session suggested that those tyre bundles were not just modified in the way that you were talking about before. There may have been some changes to the rubber that they've used to bind them. They're using a conveyor belt style of rubber, and it sounds as though the comments the team managers made to the drivers as we got underway was that they've changed that overnight, and that's in response to some pretty heavy comments by the drivers yesterday, Lee.
And Greg, those tyre bundles that you talk about, they are right on cue. Those tyre bundles you talk about captured both drivers from the Roo Sport team. Of course, as the boys mentioned, Justin Wilson with his broken wrist. And it happened to Ryan Briscoe yesterday as well. And the team said to me he was making such good progress, and all it was a 2-inch mistake. 2 inches wider, he wouldn't have done it, but he was 2 inches too far over, Neil, and that swallowed the wheel.
Will Power also said to me this morning, though, that he found that it was better than last year, that the bundles are in a defined position, they're staying there, they're anchored firm so that people don't shortcut. And last year, because the bundles get bumped, it effectively allows people to shortcut the circuit, and therefore there's real inconsistency in the way in which everyone's dealing with the racetrack, and that's a bit frustrating for drivers. So there's a couple of alternative viewpoints on it, but it appears as though they've done something overnight to make life a little more comfortable for the drivers today. Certainly a rarity, as we said earlier, for someone to be injured as a result of a tyre making contact with those tyre bundles at the apex. Ryan Briscoe, incidentally, 10th, so just nudging in and around that top 10 area at the moment. He was pretty upbeat yesterday despite the little drama in qualifying, because he feels as though he's coming to terms with the car. It's not an easy thing to do, Billy, to just jump into a car and all of a sudden produce numbers. You need to understand what adjustments are required to get the most out of the car, how to work and interpret what your engineer's saying. And the session goes green again, so away he goes. Ryan's out of the car there, so they'll stop and have a bit of a think about it. Allmendinger heads the charts at the moment.
Only a couple of minutes left.
Yeah, they'll maybe get one time lap. They're being called on the radios at the moment to say, make sure you give yourself some room. So they'll probably get past the control line once. Incidentally, the control line in practice and qualifying in ChampCar is adjacent to pit in. However, in tomorrow's race, the control line becomes the start-finish line. So you'll see times bob up when we're monitoring times in qualifying this afternoon. They'll flash up before they actually get to the start-finish line, and that's the reason why.
Riding with Andrew Ranger. Haven't seen much of him this weekend. He's been down the back and just trying to dial himself into this circuit. And on that subject, Neil, getting back to Ryan briefly, this would be, I'd imagine, a difficult circuit if you are climbing into a ChampCar for the first time. There's got to be easier circuits in which to acclimatise yourself with the car, surely. I know they all have their little nuances.
That's definitely the case. And the thing about this track is that most of the speed is made by being very, very brave under brakes. And when I say brave, I mean seriously committed. Like here into turn 7, you'll notice that when the guys are really on it, when we're with Bourdais or ChampCar or Allmendinger, Tracy, they rush into there. Let me see, I've got some data here in front of me at 275 kilometres an hour and braking inside the 100-metre mark. So, you know, you've really got to make speed with massive commitment here under brakes. And if the car's nervous and it's not riding well, or it's bottoming out and the floor's striking the road, that can be very unnerving. So it takes a little time to understand what it is you need to adjust and by how much to find the happy medium in the car. And a lot of blind corners as well. And the trick with these cars is to keep them rolling through a lot of the 90-degree second gear corners around here as well.
Checkered flag this time by. Checkered will be this time by.
So Andrew Ranger doesn't get another lap out. So he's just negotiating the turn 2 chicane complex at the moment.
The Cars Guide chicane, and then it's up to Crazy John's Corner. And of all the years we've raced here, that's probably the best name for it. Some of the drama we've seen here over the years.
There's a yellow flag out there now. The checkered flag has been deployed, so the session's effectively over, although people that are on the circuit will be able to complete their lap. So this is the final practice session for ChampCar. The next period where they're on the track is called qualifying, but it's broken into 3 parts. They get 15 minutes of practice, 10 minutes of pause to adjust the cars, and then another 20 minutes of qualifying, which will be the second of the 2 qualifying sessions they have over the weekend. And at the moment, it's Will Power with provisional pole, guaranteed a front row start, as I said before.
Some of the teams call that little practice window in the qualifying hour pre-qualifying, so if you hear that expression, you'll know what they're talking about as they go through Falcon Corner.
Turn 8, and that's caught a lot of people over the years. It's quite bumpy on the approach. Big crown in the middle of the road on the exit, and it's very bumpy on the exit as well, so it's easy to either clip the inside wall or slide wide on the exit. This is where Ryan went off to the right at turn 12. You can see second gear, a lot of horsepower, a lot of torque, very easy for the car to crank sideways under acceleration here, and his pit-in control line there, and it's 15 miles an hour from this point.
It's a good example there of Ranger wrestling with the car as he came around that hairpin. Allmendinger's 1:32 is still the best time. We'll go through those in just a moment for you. But it's Forsyth on top, and that is a nice result given the panic that you would have seen in that pit box yesterday. AJ was on the circuit for qualifying, but of course that late session crash cost him his best time. So while he wasn't certainly set back as far as Tracy, he was a little concerned. He dropped down to P5. But now they're back on the top of the game as we still sit inside Will Power's car. And here we go. Next up, the Newman-Haas combination of Junqueira and Sebastian Bourdais. We didn't see Bruno here last year, obviously, because of the horrifying crash that kept him out of the series for quite a while, and it was a slow road back. Pitsonia doing extremely well. And further down the order, some of these drivers, Rangers, Walsman, Legge and Worth, struggling. We'll be back. One of the hardest places to get to on any motor racing circuit is right here, pit lane. They do have guided walks, but on this hot side of the wall, only Vortex Flycam can take you there safely via Network 10. And let's go down there now in a different way, where Greg Rust is talking to Paul Tracy, who's on the way back.
I guess, Paul, you're effectively trying to cram 2 days into one here. Where are you at with the car?
Well, I mean, we're working on it. Obviously, it's we're a full day behind everybody. Yesterday, we only did 5 laps, and my second run out crashed, so never got out for qualifying. So, it's we made a fairly good recovery this morning to end up second, but we're behind the 8 ball a little bit. But I gave myself a new haircut last night for motivation, so we'll see how it goes. Just quickly tell me, the radio chat, and certainly from the way you've been talking to your engineers there, it's about understeer. Is that what you're trying to solve at the moment? Yeah, I mean, the rear of the car is pretty good. It just I've got a lot of understeer in like 2, 3, a lot of the 90-degree corners at the other end of the track. So, we just need to get the thing to point in a little bit better so I can get back to the power sooner. So we're just having to wait a little bit too long. We hope that fast new haircut brings you some luck. Cheers. Thank you.
Well, it's been a big learning weekend for Australia's Ryan Briscoe. Slight spin there. What happened?
We just thought we'd put a new set of tyres on at the end and see what the car would be like on new tyres, and just the cold, brand new slicks caught me out there, and I just looped around the last corner. We had to pull it in the pits, but been going fantastically that session. Getting a real good feel for the car on the circuit, and time's looking good. I know for old tyres, we're running in the top 10, so you know, the weather's not looking good, but I'm praying to God it's going to stay dry for qualifying this afternoon.
You've made a real name for yourself already as being so adaptable and being able to jump in a variety of cars and learn very quickly. By your own scale of measurement, have you learnt this quickly enough?
Yeah, I mean, obviously there's still a lot to learn here, and you know, you can't just jump in and be, you know, the hero first lap out, but I'm really happy with the way things are going, and I'm feeling confident in the car, and just there are a few small things like that, you know, the little loop on cold tyres is just inexperience with this car, but feeling pretty good, comfortable with the pace we've got, and I'm sure, you know, there's going to be a lot more to come.
We're thoroughly enjoying watching out there. Qualifying to come, best of luck with that.
Thanks heaps.
Well, Will, that was practice time. Did you find any benefit in the car? I know you made a spring change, some adjustments to the car.
Well, basically we worked on race setup because we have a guaranteed front row start, so it's important for us to sort of concentrate on fuel save and a good balance for the race. And at the end there we were going to go for a lap, but it was all broken up with red flags.
Was the change you made better, or it seemed like lap times from what we could say that maybe what you had before was better?
Yeah, I think we didn't really get a good read because we didn't get the tyres up to temperature because of the red flags. So I'd say we're going to go back to what we had yesterday or close to that and start qualifying like that.
What about race car? Pretty confident?
Yeah, I mean, the balance stays consistent. That's a good thing. I mean, the tyres go off and you lose a little bit of traction, but the car feels pretty good over a run.
Well done.
Thank you.
Well, the two-time champion and series leader Sebastian Bourdais only needs to finish 9th or better this weekend to claim a 3rd title. How's the car looking so far?
It's looking pretty good. It's just, I think we were all chasing a little bit track conditions this morning for some reason. It was very inconsistent, so I know probably just started the session on the wrong foot, so it never helps. Got a penalty early on, and then red flags and traffic, and you know, when it's like this, it's always a little difficult.
And as you and I start talking, there's some sprinkles happening here. What if it rains this afternoon, Sebastian?
Well, it starts to be a little bit than sprinkles, but yeah, I guess you know, I'm not the weatherman, but we'll have to advise as it comes.
We'll leave it to it. Thank you.
Thanks.
Yeah, just a light sprinkle, nothing too heavy at this stage, but who knows what will come up in the next hour or so. We have a V8 supercar race still to come and then qualifying. Incidentally, Bourdais is aiming to become the first person to win an American open-wheel championship 3 years in a row since Ted Horn back in 1946 through to 1948, so it would be a significant achievement. Catherine Legge, well, she's also aiming for a significant achievement, her first full season, the first woman to secure a full-time drive in this male-dominated world of ChampCar since it became the ChampCar World Series. Her exceptional performance in the Atlantic Series along with sheer determination has earned her seat at PKV, and that tenacity was really tested in that shocking crash that Neil was talking about in the latest round at Road America. Boy, did she bounce back, and she is more determined than ever, as Greg Russ discovered.
Week for your team boss, or one of your team bosses, who's an Australian, obviously, and you've said on the record here that you'd really like to do well in Australia as you know, more or less a reward for him.
For my drive, yeah, obviously Kevin, this is like a home race for him, Kevin Kalkoven, and so it would be great if we could have a good result here. I think you always want to have a good result wherever you go, but this one's kind of special. You know, I've been told about it all year, and it's just such an event. It's not just a race for us, it's an event to come out here. And so, yeah, we're really trying hard. We had a great car here last year with Cristiano and Jimmy, so hopefully we'll have a good result this year.
Can you recount for us that massive crash?
My accident that seemingly made me famous for all the wrong reasons. It was a pretty scary deal. You know, we're doing about 180 miles an hour, about 300 kilometers an hour, and we just came out of a carousel and suddenly speeded up. And I was thinking to myself, what could have caused that? And by the time that thought process has gone through my head, the car had swapped ends on me. Obviously, the rear wing had broken, it had come apart and flown off. And I suddenly kind of just turned around, hit the fence, and I was thinking, oh, this isn't good. It took off and then started rolling, and stuff kept hitting me on the head, and it was probably the scariest crash I've ever seen, let alone ever been in, and I was very, very lucky to walk away from it with only bruising to my knees.
Catherine, you came up through in the more recent pass through Atlantics, and you did exceptionally well there. You know, a good victory at Long Beach. I think 3 wins during your championship where you finished 3rd.
Mm-hmm.
What was the step up like to a champ car from that series?
Brutal. It really was a big step for me to move into the champ car after Atlantic, just because I had so little experience experience. I'd done maybe 25 races in my entire career. And so it wasn't so much the driving of the car, you know, the driving that you get in any car and you can drive it if you're a race car driver, but it's the setting it up and the working with your engineers and everything else, you know, the pit stops, the push to pass, the length of the races, the different tyres, the qualifying. I mean, qualifying is still my problem, really. That's still what I struggle with, driving on those red tyres. So it was a big step, but I honestly believe it was the right thing for me to do going into next year when the new cars come out, because I'm going to be so much further ahead then than I would have been if I'd done another year in Atlantics. That I think we did the right thing. However, it would have been nice to have won a championship and won more races this year.
This is a very male-dominated game, and I know you'd be acutely aware of that. How accepting of the boys, in terms of your rival male drivers and the crews in pit lane, how accepting of you have they been?
I think very accepting. I don't know what it's like to be a male driver, so I don't know how different it is, right?
Good point.
So I've always been the only girl, and I've always found the same thing. If you try and be professional and you try and do what they do, then you normally get accepted. And I think they obviously have respect for what I'm trying to achieve. I'm just like any of them. And I haven't had an issue. They've all been great. It's like one big happy family.
Number of top 10 finishes, I think 4 for you so far this year. We wish you all the very best here on the Gold Coast.
Thank you.
Big weekend for different reasons for Australian Ryan Briscoe. He's making his ChampCar debut this weekend in the Rue Sport entry, replacing, as Neil explained, the injured Cristiano D'Amato. He is very, very experienced in open-wheel racing. He, of course, has tested Formula One, among many other things. He's 25, and he's hoping to make the sort of impression that will give him a permanent drive for next season. Neil Crompton sat down with Ryan to find out a little more.
Ryan, it's bizarre how things turn around, but at this point in the year, you're now getting the opportunity to do what you possibly thought you may have been able to do at the start of the year in ChampCar. Congratulations on a great break.
Yeah, no, it's really fantastic. You know, I'm so excited to be here and racing in the ChampCars, and especially to be here at Surfers Paradise. You know, it's definitely something that's been on my mind all year, and I'll just add it to the list of the other race cars I've been doing this year.
You've driven everything but the pace car, basically, in 2006, haven't you?
Yeah, it's been pretty crazy, but good. You know, definitely made the most out of a year where it sort of got off to a pretty rusty start, not having a full-time drive. You know, from how it started, I don't think I could have hoped for anything better the way things have gone this year.
Probably true to say that you genuinely love driving champ cars.
Yeah, I mean, it's one of my favourite cars I've ever driven. I don't know if it's the turbo engine or just, you know, it's got a lot of grunt, good downforce, and the sort of car you really, you know, you can muscle around and almost feel like a car where the harder you drive it, the faster you go. Whereas a lot of race cars, you really got to sort of back it off and slow down a bit. But you know, they're an exciting race car to drive. I guess you know, this weekend I'll be finding out what they're like to race.
Great opportunity with a top team in Rue Sport, partnered with Justin Wilson. 2 race opportunities, Australia and Mexico. Do you have your fingers crossed that this may turn into a 2007 opportunity?
It's definitely something you know, I'm taking into consideration. Although with the team, you know, we've just talked about doing, you know, finishing off this season. We get to know each other and get a feel for it all, and then, you know, obviously during that time we'll talk about, you know, what possibilities the future holds for both sides of the party. But you know, there's nothing in you know, planned for next year yet.
Tell me about the V8 supercar experience. You sat everybody on their backsides at Sandown in qualifying, which was a tremendous performance. What was the overview of the whole thing from your viewpoint?
It was definitely an eye-opener, a great experience. The Holden Racing team really looked after me, you know, fully in every way. You know, they gave me everything I needed, full support from all my teammates, the equipment, everything, and it really was a fantastic experience. You know, going to Bathurst was just amazing, you know, to get a feel for what everyone talks about that track. You know, it really is an amazing place. I was looking forward to getting a bit more experience during the race, but it wasn't meant to be. But definitely I'm hoping to be able to come back, you know, maybe next year if I can.
Beyond all else, you're passionate about racing, you're a racer. Are you genuinely excited about this opportunity?
Oh, I think it's fantastic. You know, just to be racing out here in Australia in front of a home crowd, it really is. It's a new experience for me. I haven't done it in my whole career since I was racing go-karts under the age of 15. So it's a new, exciting experience for me, and you know, I couldn't be more excited.
We have a lot more to come for you on this exciting Saturday of V8 Supercar and ChampCar racing. But on the way to the break, some highlights of this event with a very colourful history.
Vassar comes down and he takes the checkered flag. Jimmy Vassar puts the arm in the air. Job well done for everybody at Chip Ganassi Racing. You deserve the celebration, boys. This is a true team effort.